Besimcha, you bring great love. Ahava Rabba, and I believe, Anima Amina, that the life you live is about what you give. You bring me joy. Sason Besimcha, you bring great love. Ahava Rabba, and I believe, Anima Amina, that the life you live is about what you give. Oh.
I don't know if Jerry's brother Sheldon's story about how CAJE was founded is exactly right, but it might as well be. It was something along those lines. Somewhere in the middle of Ohio, I lived in Akron, he lived in Canton, grew up two crazy people who cared about Jewish education. And when we actually started doing CAJE, all those New York and California Jews that had been to Camp Ramah, we kept saying, who are those people? Who are those people? Jerry and I founded CAJE together. We were extremely young. I was actually 5 years older than Jerry. He was about 22. But he might as well have been much more in terms of everything that he knew and the chutzpah that he apparently was born with. We raised the necessary funding. We designed this crazy program that we're still using today. I loved him like a brother. He died just a few months ago in May, and he was my oldest and dearest friend. We had a couple of things that we loved to do together the most. We loved to dream together and to envision a Jewish world where Klal Yisrael was the norm. That's why when you look around this room, you're going to see every kind of Jew that there is, all together and all sharing what's really important, which is our common mission to continue and to keep Judaism alive, whatever the setting is that we work. And that was an idea that we made happen through CAJE. And then, if some of you know Limud the people who founded Limud came to CAJE and saw the model and copied it, like word for word. So CAJE is the founder of Limud, and that has become a major thing as well. We dreamt about a Jewish world where Jewish education was the #1 domestic priority of the American Jewish community. And not only did we dream about it, we had the chutzpah to try to actually make that happen. And I'll tell you a story a little bit later about that. Jerry had a mantra, which is think big, work hard, and don't stop believing. And that was before that song, you know. He was an infuriating optimist. He believed anything was possible. CAJE was his dream, and I promise you, no matter what you think, we would not be here today without Jerry Benjamin. So it's been 11 years that I got a phone call in February from a person who will go unnamed, but they happened to be my sister-in-law, who was then president of CAJE at the time, telling me that CAJE had decided to go bankrupt. Now, you know what this means to us, and you can imagine that that was not news that I took very lightly. And I tried to argue with them, but when I realized that the decision had been made and there wasn't anything that I could do about it, I picked up the phone and I called Jerry. Now, Jerry's career didn't end up being Jewish education. It started that way. We were all in graduate school at Harvard in the School of Education. But he ended up founding a company along with a fellow CAJE board member called AB Data in Milwaukee, which was a company that owned all your names and addresses. But it wasn't about sending you advertisements for chocolate chips. It was about harnessing the power of the Jews for good and trying to get political power behind the people who would really stand up for Jewish causes. One of the things that he did outside of Jewish education was that he was given the job of locating all of the survivors of the Holocaust all around the world. And that's a story in and of itself. But he was able to do that in order to get reparations and to give them the support that they needed and insurance payments and all of that. So that became his day job, so to speak. But he always was involved in the Jewish community. He was the Young Leadership Chair. He was the president of the Federation in Milwaukee and so on. But CAJE was always at his heart. And when I said to him, Jerry, what do we do? What do we do? CAJE is going bankrupt. We have a choice. We can let it go, or at this stage in our life, we can do it again. What do you think? And Jerry said, what are you kidding? We're going to do it again. This is really important because I would not have done it without his saying that. It was always a Cherie and Jerry thing because we had different expertise, and his expertise was in money, and money was really important for all of this. And in fact, Jerry served as the treasurer of the board of CAJE up until his death, and he was involved in every decision, even during his last illness. So you didn't get to see pictures of Jerry talking up there because this was a video to honor him in Milwaukee, which was a really nice thing that they did, don't you think? But he had a magnetic personality. He was the most loving and caring man, a good husband, and a wonderful, wonderful father. You saw his 2 sons talking online, and we have them here today, and they're going to talk to you in a minute. So I just want to give you an idea of what it was like at the beginning of CAJE when we were 22 and we had to go into rooms and ask people to give us money because there was no 50c3, there was no organization. So if you can imagine us going into these big funders and asking for money for us. So the first CAJE conference was held at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. And there was no internet in those days, youngins, no internet. And so a poster was made of a picture of a little girl standing upside down on her head in front of one of those big black and white alphabet posters. And we sent that poster to every single school and Jewish center and anything we could imagine in the United States and Canada. And to our great joy, 350 people came from all over the country to the first conference. And 1976? 1976. So a few days before the conference, I always joke with Sydney that there's always something, right, Sydney? There was something this year, there's something every year. But that year, we got a call saying that the university service workers were on strike. Now, this was 76, and when we talked about CAJE being a union, that was not a joke. And our people who were going to be presenters were not crossing picket lines. So we had to cancel the conference, or we had to do something about it. So Jerry got on the phone, and because he was always on the phone, and he looked up the number of the union head of the service union at Brown, and he got this guy on the phone, and he said to the guy, we're having a conference there, and the guy says, well, you can't have a conference, we're going to picket you. And he said, oh, you're picketing? He said, where are you? So the guy said, well, at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, we're going to be at such and such a location. Jerry said, good, I'll be there, I'll meet you there. So he calls me, and we get in the car at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we go down and walk the picket line with the service members union. And somewhere in that walk, we convinced these people that we would bus our own tables, we would take out our own garbage, and they pushed us one step farther. we would do a march through the university with signs and with Sue Romer of blessed memory singing Union songs from her childhood, and to support this union. And that's what happened, and they didn't put up picket. They didn't picket our conference. So this was the kind of craziness that Cherie did. He did it all the time. So I'm wearing this button that says, I care. So after this first conference, we wrote this manifesto. It was the 70s, right? It was called, It Is Time. And one of the things it said was that Jewish education should become the #1 priority of the Jewish community. And so he calls up the head of the Federation. He's still 22. And he says, we had 350 people at a conference on Jewish education, and we want 2 minutes on the program of the GA, the General Assembly, 5,000 people, presidents, all that stuff, presidents of the United States who are there. We want 2 minutes to tell our story. And the answer was, you know, right, no, not at all. What are you talking about? So Cherie said, okay, fine. So he got somebody, a supporter of, I don't even know where this person came from, to rent a ballroom in the hotel opposite the main hotel of the conference. And we called all of our chevra from Philadelphia. Are the Philadelphia people here? Let me see in the house. All right. We called all of our chevra from Philadelphia to come down to the downtown hotel where the GA was being held. And for every single day of the GA, we stood in the lobby and we talked to every single person about Jewish education. And as soon as we talked to them, we gave them this button that says, I care. And that way we knew who we'd already talked to. And we invited them to come at a certain time and a certain place across the street from the GA to hear what young people had to say about Jewish education. And this was opposite, as it turned out, one of the biggest events at the GA, which was the Young Leadership event, which Cherie later became president of the Young Leadership Conference. But this moment, so I don't know how many people went to the Young Leadership Conference, but I can tell you there were at least this many people at our little event because we were in a ballroom and it was completely full. And that was the kind of thinking out of the box. In fact, somebody said there was no box with Cherie, and that's why we're here. Nobody could think in the United States of a place where all Jews could come together, where Jewish educators mattered, where we could advocate for the things that we need for ourselves and for our students and for our communities. But Cherie could do that, and I was very blessed to know him. And he's been to NewCAJE, but he was very quiet, and you didn't really have a chance so much to get to know him. But I hope you're going to get to know him today and remember him. But also, I have the pleasure of introducing his 2 sons, Ariel and Nadav, and his daughter-in-law, Lindsay. So I'll ask them all to stand up, and then I'll invite Ariel to come up. So Nadav is going to be one day a world-renowned photographer, but he lives here in Portland with Lindsay, she just came back from a hike from Mount Hood, and she's an amazing person and librarian, and Cherie loved her and her family very much. And Ariel, who is a lawyer who lives in Denver, who's starting his own business, and, you know, he's a lot like his Abba. So please welcome Ariel to come and speak to us.
So actually, a lot of what I had prepared to say has already been said, either in video or in story. But I wanted to share a couple of things. My father was he was really a man of 2 cloths. The thread that sewed the cloth together was that he was a dreamer, and that he was someone who could get anyone to find their way to tzedakah. He spent his entire life, and I mean his entire life, including his very young childhood, in the pursuit of tzedek, however you choose to translate that. Early days it might have been standing up to the bully when he was beating on Uncle Sheldon, or maybe it was standing up to the teacher when he was in elementary school, who took the paddle to his rear end for refusing to apologize for our people killing Jesus. But there was always some cause. Later in life, the causes included championing abortion rights, environmental causes. His most recent cause was working on the energy crisis and trying to find energy that would be both healthy for the world and healthy for the developing world, and bring opportunities that only energy can to the developing world. Unfortunately, his pursuit of that was cut short on May 11th when he passed away due to complications from a bone marrow transplant, though I will point out that even in his death, it was a anonymous donor that gave him his marrow. But I thought it might be interesting to hear one of the ways that he thought about tzedakah. He spent most of his life playing with the idea of what tzedakah means, and late in life, he decided he had to completely reinvent it, which was pretty much what he did in every day of his life. And he wrote a letter to go along with his reinvention of the tzedakah box. And so I brought his tzedakah box with me, and I thought I'd read you his letter so you can hear it in his words. Dear Ariel, as you know, I've been exploring tzedakah boxes. I've collected them, made several, and slowly began to reimagine this little ceremonial object that can be found almost as often as the mezuzah in Jewish homes. Eventually, I decided that the problem with tzedakah boxes was that they were designed like a child's bank with a coin slot on the top and a little locked door on the bottom. In the synagogue, when it wasn't Shabbat or a Chag, after the Amidah, the shamus would take hold of the tarnished silver box that had a lid and a slit. It was decorated with the admonition, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, justice, justice, you shall pursue. He gave it a shake. It rattled as the coin bounced. Each in attendance found something to drop in the shul pushka. Some deposited a humble penny, while others took a dollar bill and folded it with ceremony and slid it into the box. Once inside, the money of the rich and poor, the gifts of the showy and humble, found equality as they became the property of the community. These pushkas, or in Hebrew kupat tzedakah, have been part of our tradition for a very long time. In the Torah, it's written, he doth execute justice for the fatherless and widow, and loveth the stranger, in giving him food and raiment. The rabbis cite this passage to show that one of God's attributes is tzedakah. We later learned that we are each responsible for a maaser, giving 10% of our earnings. The word tzedakah itself doesn't appear until Talmudic times. It is used by some of the rabbis to describe giving charity to the needy. Tzedakah, of course, means righteousness, equity, or justice, while charity comes from the Latin word for hearts, charis. Our teachers understood that these gifts given to the needy were emulations of God. He doth execute justice. In the Middle Ages, money was collected from each family before Shabbat by the Gabbai Tzedakah, who was one of the community's righteous people, literally the warden of justice. By the 13th century, money was collected each morning when the community gathered for prayer. It was always collected in a pushka and never placed in the warden's hand, as it was to be the community's money. In 1901, at the first Zionist Congress, the Jewish National Fund introduced the blue box. Theodor Herzl said, every home has a mezuzah, every Zionist a blue box. I've tried to reimagine the tzedakah box. John Hyrcanus I, Yochanan, the nephew of Judah Maccabee, served as Kohen Gadol of the Jewish people. Although his father, Simeon, not to be confused with Simeon Reed, who this college is named for, His father, Simeon, was given permission by Antiochus VII to mint money. It wasn't until John Hyrcanus I ruled Judea that the first coins were minted in Jerusalem. Hyrcanus I reigned from 134 BCE to 104 BCE, and it is believed that early in his reign he minted the first Jewish sovereign coin in Jerusalem. One such coin hangs on the front of your tzedakah box. It's inscribed, Yochanan the high priest and head of the Jews, surrounded by a wreath. On the obverse side is a double cornucopia with ribbons and a pomegranate. This coin features the word head, rosh, and refers to the Hebrew council under whose authority the coin was minted. The alphabet in use was an early Hebrew alphabet, the same letters used in the Dead Sea Scrolls that were written in part during Hyrcanus' years as Kohen Gadol. On one side of the tzedakah box is written the word tzedakah using the Hebrew alphabet in use at the time, and on the other, written in modern alphabet, Ima's calligraphy was used to fashion the brass lettering. The coin is to remind you of the great tradition that has shaped your life, but also to offer the thought that nearly 2,200 years ago, this very coin may have been used by your generous ancestor for justice and righteousness. Unlike traditional tzedakah boxes, this one doesn't have a coin slot or a lock. Rather, a top that easily opens. When you empty your wallet before Shabbat and holidays, Ima and I hope there will be paper money rather than only a few coins. Money isn't the only thing, however, meant to be placed in this box. It's a box of justice, righteousness, and equity. Everett Fox translated the admonition that was on the tzedakah box of my childhood as, equity, equity, you shall pursue. We suspect that if you give it some thought, every week you will have brought justice, equity, and righteousness to your world. Sometimes it may be a big thing, like standing up when others sit quietly, or a smaller one, like listening to the story of an elder. Consider writing a short note describing how you participated in the tradition of tzedakah. Erev Yom Kippur, take out the little slips and read them to recall the ways you made your life holy by emulating this divine attribute. Love, Abba.
You can read more in your program book. This is my 42nd CAJE conference. And I want you to understand this, whether it's your first or your 10th or your 15th. It means I've almost spent a year of my life, 42 weeks, together with many of you, and I hope you will all be able to stand here and say that one day. We became family because we share a life path and we share a passion. And every once in a while, sad things happen to those that we love. And this week, on Shabbat, one of our great stars of NewCAJE passed away, and that was Janie Gracken. We love Janie. She was a rabbi, a storyteller, the most colorful person on the planet. Many of you have made talesim with her that you carry with you, and from what, according to Facebook over the last couple of weeks, she touched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lives and hearts. For those of you who know her, Naomi and I are going to urge you to do some of your teaching and do some of your learning in her memory and in her name during this conference. And those of you who didn't know her, you're going to hear stories as we're together. And may her name always be a blessing.
You bring me joy, sason v'simcha. You bring great love, ahava rabba. And I believe, ani ma'amina, that the life you live is about